Okay. When you're not talking, please put your microphones on mute because we have a lot of back noise. This is the Mystic River Boathouse Park Implementation Committee meeting, Monday, November 2nd, 2020. This meeting is being recorded. My name is Sandy Tishier. I'm the recording secretary for the committee, and I'm going to do a roll call so we know who's here. And then we can start the meeting. So Rick Broberg, he's not here. Catherine Birchinell, not here. Mike Crowley.
Here.
Okay. Susan Cullen is here, right? Saw you. Oh, there she is. Deb Downey is with us.
Yep,
Okay, Chad Frost. Chris Gazirak. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. Fran Hoffman, I don't see her here. Jim Kelly.
Present.
Nick Keppel. He's here. Tim O'Brien. He's not here. I don't see him.
I'm here now, Sandy.
Oh, you are here.
Yep, I had some connectivity issues, but I made it.
Oh, I don't see you. Oh. Okay, Mike O'Neill.
Here.
Okay, Brett Perkins.
Here.
Steve Planchon. Farouk Rajab. Sorry about that.
That's
Tom
okay.
Spitz
Present.
and Steve White. Is there anybody I didn't name that's here? Okay, remember to keep your mics on mute when you're not talking and to identify yourself before you speak. And now I'll turn it over to Chairman Keppel.
Okay, why don't we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank everybody for their participation in this sometimes challenging use of virtual meetings. So I'll call the meeting to order. I think we have a quorum, so we don't have to sit any alternates, but I first ask if we have any comments from the public. There are members of the public who have joined.
We don't have any members of the general public that I know of.
Okay. So we'll take up the approval of the minutes for the October 5th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the meeting minutes? And if so, does anyone wish to make any proposed revisions or otherwise make a motion to accept the minutes as drafted?
I make a motion to accept the minutes. Mike O'Neill.
I second that.
All right. Did you get that, Sandy? Mike motioned and Farouk seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
I didn't hear any no's, so I'll consider the minutes to be approved. I don't have any correspondence that I'm aware of that came to my attention. Sandy, are you familiar with any correspondence?
No correspondence, Nick.
Sue Cullen, are you familiar with any? Well, Sue, why don't you share the one piece of correspondence that Danielle shared with me, but why don't you share it with the rest of the committee? The notice we got from the state
Certainly, Nick. So we did get an approval of our sort of pre-authorization for the next set of brownfield assessment grants. And so because of that, we're able to go forward. And this was sort of we had given just sort of a one-page summary of what we were going to be going for. So we have been sort of authorized to head to the next level. So that's a good sign, of course, that we're able to march forward. So I'll tell you a little within the old business discussion items.
Okay. To me, the significance of that quote unquote authorization is that it's consistent with the state's indications in various discussions Rob Simmons had with the state, and then that Danielle has had, and including the meeting we had with the state officials back early winter, in which they said this was the type of project that they're looking to see come in. So I viewed this approval as another sign that of the receptivity of the state to the project. Moving on to old business, we can get right into the brownfield grant application update. I took a look at the bond commission website, and I think they've either canceled the November or the December meeting, Sue. You can, but it appears as though we may be waiting a while for the funding, and it's my understanding that the applications are not going to be opened until the bond commission provides some additional funding for the project. But why don't you share what you know, Sue?
So that's consistent with what I'm aware of, Nick, that until that bond authorization goes through, the notice of funding availability won't be headed forward. That being said, we haven't stopped moving forward with our grant application. They have released the new official grant application, which is quite a bit different, actually, than the one that we were working off of in draft. So the newer one, we have about 75% filled out, and fairly good luck in moving that forward. We've been very helpful. We've had Haley Hines, who's the intern from my office. She took most of our old information, mapped it over into the more obvious sections. So that would save Deb Downey and I time. And then she sat with Deb Downey and I, and we were able to move it forward a little bit further. And then Deb and I will be able to finish out that last probably 10%. So we're in very good shape in terms of the newer application. And I feel like whenever that notice of funding availability is released, we'll be in good shape to, turn that around quickly. It's usually about a 4-week turnaround once they release that NOPA. But without that bond authorization, which is of course how they sort of bless the money going forward, it won't be going forward until that happens. So either way, we're in good shape and ahead of the curve, so that we won't be surprised when that moves forward.
And is there anything else noteworthy about the manner in which the application has changed that anybody in the committee think might be interested in? Is there different areas of emphasis, or is it more a formatting thing?
The emphasis is slightly different. And maybe Debbie, with her background, would like to actually, talk about that a little more than even I would.
Excuse me, we had another call-in user number 5. Would you like to identify who you are? No? Caller number 5? I guess we'll have to assume it's general public.
Okay, this is Debbie. Just to kind of follow up on what Susan said, there is a lot of formatting changes, but they did add a lot more, it seems to me, emphasis on some of the remedial work, some of the efforts, and how remedial options were looked at. And then they have some other things they've added with regard to existing infrastructure and things like that. You know, it's hard to say whether they're really changing the emphasis or just have come up with this new format. I was so impressed by how Haley, Susan's intern, was able to really take the previous information and transfer it into the new application. Like Susan said, you know, when we sat and we worked with her, I actually added some information today on some of the remedial sections, but I think we're in very good shape.
All right, thank you. Chad, do you or Susan have anything else to offer in the way of a project budget update? I know Tom Switz has asked, you know, across a couple of meetings for, you know, updated information on the budget. I know we had a discussion at the last meeting about the use of the remaining funds, and that we were going to try to use the funds to move forward some of the permitting as much as possible. Do you want to chat about that, Chad?
I can jump in for what I'm privy to, I guess, and I'll definitely have Susan jump in on the budget side as well. As far as work goes, based on what we talked about last time with the remaining funds, which we think is in the neighborhood of about $50,000 when we take out some of the, we had some money encumbered on change order contracts to us, to my office, that we don't need. So we're releasing those funds back and then having a new change order to do all the preliminary coastal permit application work. So what I can tell you updated from that is we are actively working on it. Basically the day after that meeting last month, we got in touch with our engineer and we started going back and forth, and we've worked through quite a bit of coastal details. Our engineer, Mark at First Water Engineering, has reached out to DEP multiple times and had a lot of good conversations with them and got quite a bit of feedback from them. And we have a pretty broad meeting with a lot of people from DEP happening on the 16th of this month. So we're meeting them. They're coming down to the site. We're going to meet them out there, go through all the details that we know of now. And that's where we kind of get into more of the nuts and bolts. We've discussed stuff with them in the past, but it's been more on a conceptual basis. This, we start getting into the real details and going through how we want to do things, really listening to what their concerns are. We know they've got some possible concerns about oysters because we don't want to have a new oyster that might have, there is a disease in Connecticut that's prevalent within oysters. And so we don't want to have a bed of oysters that could foster that disease upstream from oyster beds that are actively farmed. So we're going to go through some of those details and all that sort of stuff. But very good progress, I think, at this point. Also, what I'd say is we've also deployed a salinity meter out on site. So if anybody is out there, you'll see there is a new gauge out in the water. We're also installing some, for lack of a better description, just some stakes in the water to judge ice flow for the winter. We have a zone that we've identified where we don't have good vegetation growing. We're trying to figure out why that is. One of the hypotheses, of course, is that it's ice scour from the winter. So we're trying to evaluate how much ice we get through there and what our options are for breaking that up. And then we actually just got to the office this past Friday, some netting, and we're working with the local oystermen down the river to get some oyster shells, some empty shells, and we're going to deploy some oyster bags out there, not to grow oysters on. This is simply to test the theory of, will oyster bags hold up to the winter and the ice flow, and ideally we'll hopefully see some sedimentation capture behind them and kind of test the theory. So we're spending a little bit of money just to physically put some deployments out there and kind of test the theories, which is great. We normally don't get to do that kind of testing during the design phase. So we're kind of doing that now and monitoring it as we go forward. So that's our big thing as far as what we're doing, actively working to get kind of your other question from Tom Switz, I did just email right before the meeting. I sent an email to Tom and to Sandy. I wasn't sure if I should send it to the entire group without it being forwarded directly, but I can send that through right afterwards, because really I think what Tom was trying to get to is how long is this permitting process likely to take if we do the whole thing, and what's it likely to cost? And so all I've done is taken all of the permits that we know about now. It's a Word document that we've given you several times. We've just itemized that we think, this section will take 6 months and this one will take 3 months. And based on all the fees that we've gotten from all of our sub-consultants, I've added up kind of each section. It's a little bit unfair to do it because coastal comes down to this and brownfield comes down to another number and site planning comes down to another number. But in reality, we need to be doing kind of all those together. So they're kind of intermixed. And so there's some numbers that get put in one instead of the other, when in reality, our time is split. But I will send that out to or I'll have Sandy, I guess, send it out, or you, Nick, to the entire group after the meeting, so everybody can see what that is. But it's really, that work takes place after we finish the work that we're doing now, right? So we're in the midst of doing some preliminary, all the budget numbers that I've included in there are assuming all this work that we're currently doing now is done. And the other thing I'll just point out too, there was some discussion from a schedule perspective. We had done the Gantt chart that kind of laid out each task and how long it was going to take. We did that initially, whatever it was, back in 2017. And we've updated it a couple times. I went to think of updating that for this meeting based on that request and realized that everything on that Gantt chart is completed. So that Gantt chart was a timeline to complete the master plan. And all that work is done. We haven't done a subsequent Gantt chart for the permitting and then construction documents and things like that going forward. So that's my best answer for Tom's question on that as well.
Thank you, Gary.
Yep. Sorry, it took me 2 months to get it to you, and it's pretty simple at this point. But that's kind of the best outline we have at the moment of what we know we need to do and what we think the approximate timelines are. It's a little bit better refined than we've always been saying up till now. It's about a year. It'll be a year of permitting, so at least it's a little bit more defined than that at this point.
At least I appreciate the guidance at this point. Thank you again.
Hey, Nick, it's
Yes.
Steve White. Yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Just a question for Chad, or a point to Chad. Chad, there's some funding available at Mystic Seaport for work with the middle school on river science. And it strikes me, based on what you've just been discussing, that this could be a very interesting project to get some of the middle schoolers involved in what you're trying to learn about the site over the winter. So we should have a separate call on that subject.
I agree. That sounds fantastic. Let's do it as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Nick.
Sure. Good idea, Steve. Thank you. Obviously, and Farouk, I'm sure, will enthusiastically support this. Any of those kinds of connections we can make between the project and community organizations, institutions, whether it's the school or anybody else, it's all to the good. So good idea, Steve. And thank you for the Seaport's receptivity to doing something like that. I can't imagine the school won't be interested.
We are very interested. We'd love to connect on that.
Great. So next item, discussion update from Friends of Stonington crew. Mike, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Sure. We've been spending our time in the last few months just kind of continuing the process with the Boathouse. We've spent a lot of time looking at different construction options for the Boathouse. We initially had hoped to go to a conventional frame wood building. What we found is that the truss spans on the building are significant enough that it was going to have to be largely steel reinforced with wood infill. Based on that, I reached out to a timber frame company that we've done a lot of work with, and they've actually come back with a very aggressive price for the boathouse, far less than we thought. When we initially looked into timber framing, in fact, about half of what we initially had budgeted for a timber frame structure. In addition, they've agreed to donate excess of $100,000 in engineering time to do all the engineering and architectural work for the building. So it's a very, very aggressive price. So we're pretty excited about it, obviously. It's a conventional timber frame barn structure. As it stands right now, kind of an uninsulated building. We're working on the details to figure out what level of build out we would do to the building. I have a meeting coming up with the local fire marshals just to understand what fire requirements will be required for the building, whether we can leave it a kind of a unbuilt out wood structure or whether we'll need to put fire protection in the form of sheetrock over the frame or over the wood exposed surfaces because of the commercial use. But I hope to have those meetings here in the next couple of weeks and get an answer on that. So we're pushing forward on that, obviously very hard, and trying to get to a updated budget for the building here by the next meeting. In addition, I'd like to start to talk a little bit about the house. It's kind of hanging out there. It's something that neither the Friends of Stonington crew or the town had planned on. Would love to try and have some conversations to start to put some our arms around how the house is going to be used, what it might be used for, whose responsibilities are going to be, for the movement of the house, the build out of the house, ultimately who manages the house. And Nick, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. I don't know if there's any way we can make some headway on that. And set up either some meetings within this group or outside of this group to start to talk about the house. But that obviously is going to be a big component of the park when it goes forward.
Yeah, I'm. It clearly represents a dilemma for both Friends and the town, because of the surprise that it represented from the turnaround by SHPO. So I don't know. Obviously, the town would love to see Friends, take that responsibility for the move, which of course had not been a cost that you had the Friends had originally anticipated. So I do think that there probably should be some discussions on that topic. I think from the committees, I don't want to speak for the committee, but just to share my perspective, I think it's a difficult topic, for the committee because we're, the committee members our focus is on the park, but we all know that the reason the town, or a major reason the town acquired it, was to both create a park and a boathouse on the park, as part of the park. But the committee itself has a limited jurisdiction, limited role. We don't control budgets. We don't have our own funding except to supervise, the town grant. But we have no bonding authority. I think it's in my view that it's a forum for discussions, and I think the committee could weigh in on the topic. But my 2 cents worth is I think the Friends should engage in discussions with Danielle and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and and of course it's a happens to be a thoroughly uncertain time overall with the everyone. It's no secret, and Tim knows this exceptionally, and Tim and Farouk in particular, and Mike know it very well, that the town doesn't know what monies it's going to get from the state, whether for school or for other aid. And the elephant in the room is we don't know what funding we're getting from the Brownfields program. So lots of unknowns. But I'm with so many unknowns, it's difficult for any of the parties to formulate a position. But that doesn't help the Friends, because you're trying to fundraise for a project, and all that uncertainty makes life complicated for you all. So,
and that's exactly my point. It's very hard for us to put forth kind of a clear plan when we have this large structure that we don't really know what we're going to do with yet. And so if it's nothing more than just directionally with the town, if these 2 or 3 things come to pass, we get state money, we get, what we need to move forward with the park, if we could maybe at least put an outline together of how that house might be used, such that we can talk kind of intelligently about it going forward, that would be really helpful for us.
Chairman Keppel, I'll volunteer that I'd be happy to meet with Mike and the Friends to talk from a town finance standpoint. I'm not trying to be the only one there, but I'll happily get in a meeting with Mike from representing Board of Finance and town funds.
Yeah. Could I make a suggestion? We can have all the conversations in the world, but we need to know how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take as a premise to being able to have these conversations, because no one knows that cost now. And I will remind the town that we were told that this house was going to be torn down and we were going to build a building where it stood. And, that was the anticipation that Friends came to the table with initially. And now we're burdened with the expense of the request of being asked to move and relocate and resupport a building that we know, actually need. So, I mean, this is, I think it's a hardship for Friends to have to bear that expense, which is not a small expense of money. It could be a quarter of what we had anticipated of raising, and just to build a boathouse, which the town will be better for.
Duly noted.
Hey, Nick.
Yes, Mike.
Mike Crowley. Hey, I think those 2 points that they made, it seems to me that the first thing that's got to happen is Mike and his crew have got to come up with a design that everybody accepts and SHPO, and come up with some kind of a number. Because without a plan and without a number, I don't know how you can speak about anything. So I know we had a conversation last year, and Mike was saying that, you might have to take this thing apart board by board to see what they can save out of it and what they can't save out of it, which seems to me it makes it very, very difficult. But I think those issues have to be decided upon before you go to the finance board and say, hey, I need $100,000 or whatever you need. I think the responsibility right now is on Mike and the Friends of crew to come up with a design, a plan as to how you're going to move the building and build the new one. So without cost, I don't know how you can go to the finance board. That's my take on it.
Mike, we went to the community last December, less than a year ago, with a design, and I thought there was some estimated cost of, I mean, and that design was preliminarily reviewed and approved by SHPO. So I guess, pursuant to Mike's point, Mike Crowley's point, if new information has necessitated, an adjustment in the design, doesn't that now have to go back to SHPO? Because didn't SHPO, give their approval, it's very specifically based on a particular design, as I recall.
Yeah, this is Mike O'Neill. So Mike Crowley, we have a design. It is approved. We have a planned use for the different buildings, which has been approved. So SHPO has agreed that, we can use the house as a support structure for the barn. I think their only stipulation is they want to see it used.
So what is, I'm trying to understand the conversation, Mike, that you made, that you might have to bring some reinforced stuff in to support the addition to the building, I would imagine. That's what I'm asking. And do you have a price for it?
Yeah, and I think that the answer, Mike, is that a lot of what that building costs is depend on how it's going to be used. Obviously, we could just move it and not build out the inside and leave it, for a later date. That's one option. Another option is to convert it into something, but it should be something the town or someone has a use for. And we don't necessarily need the building. It's a nice to have, it's not a have to have. So I guess really the first question is there some potential use for that building that supports some activity at the town that we could incorporate into this process or not? And that's, I think, really the first question.
Are you saying, Mike, you might not need the building? Am I hearing you right?
We don't need the building.
Okay.
The plan has been, or at least one of the plans was to potentially put some offices and bathrooms in that for the park. I don't know if that's even a reality or anything that the town wants to look at, but again, the build out of the building is largely, the cost of that building is largely based on how it's going to be used.
Okay, so what I would think is, you guys can go talk to the Board of Selectmen and see how they feel, because ultimately this whole thing ends up with them. But we got to have a plan. Now, if you don't need the building, that'd be a shame. But if you can't afford it, then you got to look at that. But the building's got to be moved before you can build the park. And underneath where you want to put the building, I think, is the contaminated site. It's got to be dug out. That's the way I understand it. So that's a new discussion there. Personally, I would certainly like to see a building there so the kids of Snowington Crew have a place to put their boats and stuff. Maybe you won't build it exclusively like you were going to. Maybe that's an option. I don't know. But I think it's a discussion we could have.
Well, what I would like to suggest is that we spend since we're probably going to have, realistically 3 or 4, maybe 5 months between now and when we hear about the Brownsfield funding, because if I'm right that the bond commission isn't meeting in November or December, and therefore the funding isn't going to be available until early 2021 to even apply for, and then there's a couple 3-month review period. We have some time here, which is not a thrilling development, but we have some time. And we were involved in the master plan for the park heavily, and then also the whole SHPO exercise. But my thought would be, let's utilize these interim months while we await the brownfield funding and do a deep dive into what is the town and the Friends and this committee's vision of what's going to go on there, and what's the interrelationship going to be, functionally between the Boathouse activities, and what Friends does and the town, because I early on when I've done a lot of research on different community. There's lots and lots of there's probably 100 different models of boathouse and park, which some completely run by towns, hybrids of private and public partnerships, and now is the time for us to frame what we want the dynamic to be. And there's loads of examples out there of successful public-private partnerships. And I think we'd be well advised to start actually looking at what are the programs that folks do, how they work together, what are the agreements, how they function hour to hour, because we've had other fish to fry for the last 2.5, 3 years, but we have a little time here, and I say put it to use, rolling up our sleeves and getting the rec department staff coming to meetings, and form a subcommittee that Steve Clancy and I worked on in the agreement subcommittee. But I think I know that Friends had some ideas about different visions of how things would operate, but I'm not sure because of the press of other business, that we've had time that a variety of ideas have been kicked around, but there's no real plan about what the town does, specifically where Friends, and of course it's not a ginormous park. It's not like Colt State Park in Bristol or Harkness, where you've got scads of space. So there needs to be a symbiosis between the boathouse activities and the water related activities, and what happens in the park. So that was
to that end, from a construction standpoint, this is Breck Perkins. Typically site work comes last, buildings get built, and then site work comes in behind that. Remediation would probably be ongoing while the building was being built, but we can't build a building until the demolition has been done and then the other building has been relocated. So we are stymied by the location of the existing structure. So the first order of business is how and who pays for the relocation of that structure, because then nothing can happen until that happens, Nick. And so,
I would respectfully disagree, Breck, because I get it that it would be helpful to know what's going to go on there, but what vision emerges between Friends and the town and this committee is going to affect potentially what each party's contribution is to what goes on there.
But Nick, regardless of who pays for it, this is the sequence of events, right? The shed gets torn down. The earth gets excavated that has the contaminated soil. A new foundation goes in. The building is put on rails and it's moved over to its new site. Then the construction for the boathouse can happen. So that's the sequence of events. That's the way it would occur. Then the site work would happen with the rest of the remediation. That's typically what a construction schedule would look like for building this park. So the first bit of business is moving the building. So, nothing can happen. Friends can't build anything until that gets sorted.
I know, but Mike said 15 minutes ago, he raised the question. It wasn't my question. He raised the question, what's going to go on in the building, the historic house, and we have, because it could be an adjunct to the boathouse, but Mike's point is it doesn't have to be. And so, and also, we really have not had extensive discussions about how, hour to hour, the park is going to be administered for public use and, maybe to some extent private use. But the park and the boathouse. So I don't know. I get your point, Breck, about there's going to be a schedule, but it would seem useful to know what the town's role is going to be in the park, and to what extent the house can supplement, augment that park use, versus and vis-a-vis the rowing and the rest of the aquatic activity that are going to be coordinated clearly by Friends or by the Hart Perry Rowing Center.
Well, and Nick, that's precisely the point I was making, is I think that utilization is going to dictate how we use the buildings. I think we know how we want to use our boathouse. What we don't know is exactly how this existing house is going to be used going forward. And I think that's the first step, is let's get together with the town and figure out how it might be used, and then we'll better understand who pays for it and how.
But I guess while we don't control the funding, we're not the town when it comes to funding. I do think we are the town when it comes to what happens in this space. And we're not even necessarily the final, we're just advisory. But I think we're the lead advisor to the town on, what is a prudent use of this house, as it relates to park activity and, water related activity. And I don't know.
So Nick, do we set up a separate meeting to discuss that with Friends, the committee, and some folks in the town, including Tim?
Yeah, I'm fine if we want to charge a subcommittee, and let them bring back. What is that noise? What is the deal? Is someone? It sounds like they're air blasting. Anyway, yeah. So I'm fine with the subcommittee doing it, but I do think it needs to percolate back to the full committee. So, anybody wish to volunteer for a subcommittee on park boathouse interaction?
I'd certainly like to be on it because of recreation. The other thing is, I'd like to hear what Susan Cullen has to say. Nick?
Yes, go ahead,
get
Mike.
that?
Sorry. I
I'd
missed
like
the
to hear
last
what
part.
Susan
The
has
noise.
to say.
I missed that last part, Mike.
What's that?
I missed the noise overtook your
Okay.
last point.
I said I would be on that subcommittee because of recreation.
Sure.
I can be a liaison between the town and recreation. But I would like to hear what Susan Cullen has to say about this conversation.
Wow. Susan, you still with us?
Nick, I'm still there. Was having a hard time last 10 minutes, the sound keeps getting overpowered by something. So I'm not hearing every word of what's been said. So I heard my name, so I was trying to hear in between the whistles, but there's a lot of background noise, so I'm not totally clear.
Yeah.
Breck, it looks like Breck Perkins is getting some feedback on it.
Breck, are you muted?
Yes, I am.
Wow. Well, Susan, you want to try to, I don't know if Mike was looking for your perspective on this topic. Were you able to? We're talking about having a subcommittee tasked with looking at use of the house and specifically, but also more generally, the interrelationship between the town and Friends / Hart Perry Rowing Center in the administration of the park.
Certainly, and I think that's sort of a difficult answer to have from any of our perspective. I mean, I think as you began through the process, there was always the sort of assumption that the house would be able to. The fact that SHPO wanted it to remain and be sort of restored in some manner was, I think, a big surprise to everyone. Even to me on the public side, when I wasn't standing, here as staff, when I was reading about that, I think I was surprised as well. So I think it's difficult because every person in the conversation had made that assumption and had made their plans based on that assumption, so that when that information came back from SHPO, and that makes it difficult for all of us to move forward, because you don't quite know where you stand. What are we going to use that for? I mean, talk about unintended sort of consequences. I don't think any of us really expected that. So we probably all need to come back to the table in some fashion and work that out. And sequentially, it's important, because we need to know, where that stands versus the other items in a geographic sense on our plan. Without knowing the disposition of that house, is the house going to be restored? Is it going to be moved? Is it going to have to be, changed in a large way? Is there going to have to be a lot of money, a little money put into it? All those different factors could make a big difference in how the rest of the site is sort of used from a geographic sense. So I'm sure that that's a difficult question that we're all going to have to go back to the table and tackle.
Well, but Susan, some of that has been clarified by SHPO, whether we like it or not. They've said it stays and it has to be, refurbished, substantially refurbished. And so its location isn't any mystery. It's been located geographically, and it's been a condition of their approval, which is the door to the rest of the project, has been that, probably, Mike O'Neill, feel free to chip in, but you're probably looking at, $400,000 or $500,000 in that range. It's not $1 million, but it's not $50,000 or $100,000 to move it and refurbish it. So, but that's, to me, that's a tough card that was dealt to the project, and we're going to have to sort out the financial part of it. I'm talking about the need to get on the same page, which I don't think we are, just because we've done this beautiful master plan and done lots of thinking about the sorts of what we want the park to look like. Friends now has come up with a design with the forced appendage of the building, the quote unquote historic building. But how this thing is going to function, we need to put our crystal ball on the table and say 10 years from now, over the course of 4 seasons of the year, what is going to go on there and who's going to do it and who's going to do what. I think lots of different things have been bandied about, but there's we almost need a usage plan. We've designed the park, but we need a usage plan and who has what roles in the administration of the park. And that's why I say, I don't blame Mike for being concerned about how he goes forward, because he's trying to figure out how much money he's got to raise, and whether he's got to raise a $500,000 extra or not is a big topic for him. I get that, but meanwhile, when it's raised and when the building is open, he's also raising what is going to go on. He knows full well what's going to go on in the Boathouse, but whether and to what extent whether Rich Ward has staff in the house running rec programs in concert with the Pequot Seapost Nature Center and or the school and whomever else. Those are the things that we need to sort out. And of course, the sooner the advantage of creating that vision is that then we can share the vision with all with the 20 plus different organizations that have shown that they're interested in and prepared to be fully supportive. We just need to we need to flesh out how it's actually going to function. So Mike's going to be on the subcommittee. Tim's going to be on the subcommittee because he made the mistake of offering to talk to Mike. Mike O'Neill will have to be on the subcommittee. Is there anyone else from our committee who wishes to participate in such an examination of what's going to go on at the park and how the park is going to function in concert with the rowing center?
Nick, it's Debbie. I'm happy to participate, but I'm not actually on the committee, so.
Well, your involvement is always welcome. So that'd be wonderful. All right, that's a good starting group. Anybody else who wants to, just like anybody? We've got a few key people. Catherine and Tran are not currently participants, but and if Rich Ward is a non-committee member of this subcommittee, to me that would be a good thing as well. Shall I take it as a consensus that I'm not even sure we need a vote, but does everybody agree that this group should spend the next 30, 60 days giving that some consideration?
I agree.
I agree.
All right. Very good. So we've got, all right, let's move on to the only new business we have, which is the 2021 meeting calendar.
I did notice a discrepancy in one of the dates. November 4th should be November 1st, 2021. So when you vote on it, it'll be voted on as amended.
Okay. Essentially, what's proposed is meetings Monday at 6. We'll have to sort out when we stop doing virtual. We're going to presume that we'll meet at the police station, but that will have to be confirmed. But as far as the date, it'll be the first Monday.
I've already booked the police station.
Okay, great. So first Mondays, except for what is it? Is it Labor Day? Which is the holiday that?
September 6th is Labor Day, so
So the second Monday, and then the November, it's the first, you say, Sandy, instead of later? So is there a motion to adopt the amended meeting schedule, 2021 amended meeting schedule?
I make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
All right, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. Great. Motion carried. That's our 2021 meeting schedule. Comments from the public. Are there any members of the public who've joined us?
I'm not sure, but I don't think anybody is commenting, so we're good.
Okay. Any comments from the committee?
Nick, it's Steve White.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Nick, I'd like to introduce to the committee Chris Kosorek, who's been with us on the call. Chris is the Vice President for Watercraft Preservation and Programming at Mystic Seaport Museum, and he's also currently the Interim Executive Vice President. I'm nearing the very end of my tenure, and I'd very much like to have Chris continue in my absence to attend the meeting as a guest. Chris lives in Mystic, but he lives on the Groton side of the river. But I think you'll find Chris to be an important resource for your conversations going forward. And he'll be attending again as a guest to keep an eye on things and to respond in a way as a neighbor might respond with respect to the needs of the Boathouse Park. So welcome, Chris.
Yes, welcome, Chris.
Thanks all. Happy to join and help
Welcome,
out where
Chris.
Yeah, we're delighted that you personally and that the Seaport continues to be interested in the project. We all want to be a good neighbor to everyone in the area, and we particularly know how important it is to have a good working relationship with the Seaport. I think everybody on the committee knows the extraordinary contribution the Seaport has made to, rowing, high school rowing in particular, in Stonington. That without the Seaport's kindness and generosity of its space, there wouldn't be a rowing program that kids like my daughters benefited from enormously. So we're big fans of the Seaport, and we're delighted that you're willing to continue, maybe not as a Groton resident, not an official role like Steve is, but we'll welcome your participation and your input.
Great. Well, happy to help in any way, and look forward to keeping our support for Stonington Rowing.
Super. Any other comments from the public, or excuse me, comments from the committee? Anyone wish to add anything else? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Jim Kelly, so moved.
Jim Kelly moves and seconded.
Farouk seconds it.
All right, Farouk, thank you. All those in favor of, obviously, everybody should, I don't think it's a concern, given the interest that seemed to be evidence across the country, but make sure you vote tomorrow. And all those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. Opposed? I don't hear any, so motion carries. Thank you all for your time.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Sandy.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Steve, are you staying on the committee?